What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Phillip Jordan Show. I'm your host, Phillip Jordan, for Last World College Football, 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Woods Football. On today's show, I'm going to be joined by Chris Lee from the Southeastern 14 and VandySports.com. We will look back at this previous week in the SEC, week 4 in the conference. We will look back at Florida and Tennessee. We'll also talk about the Arkansas A&M game. Look ahead what Alabama has coming forward on this schedule, what's going on with Auburn, and a preview of Ole Miss in Kentucky. You can check out the Phillip Jordan Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also watch the show over on YouTube at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell for all the notifications so you'll know when there's a new video, and leave a comment on the video. I'll read that on a future edition of the show as well. All right, first up on today's show, I'm joined by a good friend of the program. Been having this guy on my podcast for a few years now, but Chris Lee. Check him out over at the Southeastern 14. Him and Blake Lovell do a great job keeping you up to date on all things SEC and also VandySports.com. And Chris, I appreciate you joining the show today.
Always fun. Always happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, we joked off air. First time we've done this on the video platform. It's like I said, still trying to step up in the world with this. But it's been an interesting first 3 or 4 weeks with the SEC, I think, to say the least. I think we thought we knew some things going in, and then things have been opposite. Some things we did know, they're coming true. Just overall, coming out of week 4, just what's been your overall thoughts?
Yeah, I think, let's work backwards here a little bit. I think this weekend that just happened was not the most interesting weekend off the jump. And I really didn't think it was that interesting as it was going down. As I replayed it a little bit in my mind this morning, I think it was an underrated weekend. You had, we could talk an hour about Missouri-Auburn alone, right? That was just bizarre. You had the way A&M had a field goal tick off the tip of the upright. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. I've watched a couple thousand football. Like, you couldn't – I think you should get extra points for that, because, like, you couldn't do that if you tried. That's way harder than kicking it through the uprights, right, to hit it exactly on that spot. You had Georgia in a spot where you figured Georgia was just going to roll Kent State. And, like, if you just turned on the TV and didn't put, you put black and white uniforms on these teams with no logo, you would not really be sure what you were watching for a while. Now, I think that was a fluke. And if you want to go back on the whole season, I said before the year, I felt like the tier, you kind of felt like Georgia and Alabama were going to separate from everybody. And I still think that's the case. But, like, from 3 to 12, and right now I'd probably go 3 to 10. I think I'd put South Carolina, Auburn, Missouri, and Vandy in that bottom 4 as its own category. But you go everybody else other than Bama and Georgia, that 3 to 10, it almost seems to me like the NFL, like, just pick one team and pick another team and match them up and throw them on anybody's field, and you kind of don't know what's going to happen. Case in point, we did our power rankings this morning. I think Florida is probably the number 10 team in the league. I think Tennessee is probably the number 3 team in the league right now. Those 2 teams played in Knoxville. That went down to the final play. We don't always get interesting in the SEC, but I think just seeing that parity from 3 to 10, you got that question of Auburn or Alabama. I've gone back and forth on which is better. And I still think, you look at the bottom 4 teams. Vanderbilt's won 3 games this year. Got blown out by Alabama, but that's a little bit of a different animal. You've got South Carolina that went to a bowl game last year when the season was over and done. So you still got some potential for more storylines even in that tier. I just think that's all you can ask. You hate going in seasons where you're like, there's 3 or 4 really good teams and everybody else. To me, this is a lot of fun when every week there's a lot of drama and a lot of arguments of who's going to win this game, and you're picking one team and I'm picking another. That to me makes for interesting football, and that seems to be what we have heading into October.
Yeah, I know. And going in this past weekend, I mean, I think you could have made an argument for Arkansas being that third team. You had
Yeah.
Tennessee. I mean, Kentucky's really good too. I mean, they got some issues on the offensive line, but Tennessee come out and Chris, all season, I was afraid to talk good about Tennessee because I'm like, how many times has this program done
Yeah.
this? You know, you did it under Butch, you did it, you know, Pruitt, you know, all these other, you know, coaching staffs that come in right up the jump, done really well, solid first season or two, and then we get that hype train. But Tennessee, just seeing what they did on Saturday, and I know Florida's not a great defense, I know that, but still, without your best receiver, Cedric Tillman, it didn't matter. I mean, they were getting guys open, and I don't think it's necessarily just, you know, guys beating coverage. I think Josh Heupel's doing a really good job of getting his players open. Brew McCoy was big, you know, Hendon, you know, Hooker was awesome running and throwing. Just what's been, you know, coming out of that game for Tennessee, and just, you know, your thoughts on this program, where it's at.
I had said before the game, I thought that if Tennessee won that game on CBS and Hendon Hooker was really good, and I think this got magnified with Tillman being out too.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if that's how it played out, he should start being a lot more at the forefront of that Heisman contention list. Now, is it going to play out that way? Probably not. I'm not sure that their defense is going to be good enough to win him the Heisman, which that sounds stupid, but you know, usually the Heisman winner is the quarterback / running back / receiver on the college football playoff team, and I don't know that Tennessee's defense is going to be that. The flip side to Saturday was that Tennessee's defense made Anthony Richardson look like he hasn't looked all year. And again, that's got nothing to do with Hendon Hooker. But my point is, I think Hooker is probably, I'm not going to say he's the best player in the league. I think that's Bryce Young still or Will Anderson. But I think he's the guy, like, if you take him off his team, the difference in whatever the win-loss record is with Hendon Hooker there for 12 games and him not there, and them going to Joe Milton, or if someone else beat Milton out for the backup job, who that would be. I think it's bigger than maybe any other player in the league taking him out. I think he's a great player. I mean, his career touchdown to interception record is what? I mean, he's 45-3 or something like that at Tennessee. It's unreal. My opinion is, if Hendon Hooker is the best player in the country, and maybe he is, he should win the Heisman. On his own merits. I don't know that that's how the system works, which is why I think Tennessee's going to have to play a little defense to give him a chance. But man, I was awfully impressed with what he did.
Yeah, I think for me, that game, what really flipped the game to me was before halftime, because Florida was up 14-10. Tennessee scores right before half, and then they get the ball and score again. It's 24-14. And, you know, Florida's just playing catch up. But you're right. Anthony Richardson played really well. And going in, and he finally throws his first touchdown pass of the season. I mean, he threw for, 453 yards. He had 2 touchdown passing, had 2 rushing touchdowns. And they had a shot there at the end. It's just kind of funny. You think on those 2 touchdowns that got them back in the game, if you just kick the extra point, you can change your philosophy. When you got the onside kick, you're just going for a field goal, not trying to score a touchdown. But what's been your feeling too with Florida right now, with Billy Napier and of course Anthony Richardson there?
I talked to someone this morning who's pretty well connected around the league, not a name guy, but just a guy who knows a lot of people. He said the feeling is within a couple of years, Napier's going to have Florida on that level competing with Georgia, the way they're recruiting. I thought that was an outstanding hire. I just thought that Florida was that team that, like, just for years, like the police blotter got too many headlines down there. And even under Urban Meyer, when he was winning, I mean, they had a mass murderer on the team. Or, I mean, I wasn't at the time, but point is, discipline was and character were lacking. I think that's the thing he's going to bring. You're always going to get talent there. If Florida can eliminate a lot of the distractions that come with that stuff and the suspensions, I just thought he was a great hire for them for that reason. Obviously, he's got connections within the league. He has an idea of what it takes to win here. They don't have all the players yet. I don't know. Anthony Richardson, to me, remains the biggest wild card in the league. I just about written Florida off as not having a quarterback until that game, and some of that's certainly on Tennessee. But they don't have the players they will have. But I think Florida's going to win some games between here and the rest of the year. I said before the year, Phillip, I'd rather play them early than late when he's got stuff coming. And so I think that might be, again, like it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
Florida routed Tennessee at this time. And at the end of the year, you said, boy, you play that game over, and it probably plays out differently. I don't know that it's going to be that dramatic, but point is, stuff changes a lot between the end of September and bowl game time, and I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with Florida in that regard.
Yeah, because this time last year, I believe they were 3-1, and they had that near loss. They almost beat Alabama, and I think a lot of people were going to say, "Wow, Dan Mullen's really got it going." Yeah, he lost Kyle Trask, he lost Pitts at tight end, but things are looking pretty good. And then the wheels fell off. You see that a lot, where a team can start good in September, and then it falls apart, and it did for them last year. So I hadn't thought about that till now, but yeah, they were in a good spot this time last year, and it fell apart under Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I mean, and think back, Florida darn near beat Alabama a year ago,
Mm-hmm.
And I think statistically, he might have had more yards. I mean, it doesn't matter, but point is, that was that team then, and that team by the time they played Samford. I mean, it wasn't even the same team. And of course, in the SEC, the self-destruct button once it gets hit can be a pretty powerful force, which might be a good segue to Auburn. But
we'll
the point is, yeah, and well, and the team Auburn just played too. I have some questions about that, but yeah, there's back to my point about Napier. There's a big difference between times of the year, and I think if you played Florida early, you're probably going to be happy you did rather than in November.
And it just on the A&M Arkansas game, that was another headline game over the weekend. You talked about it, the field goal hitting the top of the goalpost. I'm with you. I've never seen that before, but man, that was a huge win for Jimbo Fisher, I think, because going in, I mean, Arkansas jumps up 14-0. KJ Jefferson, that offense was moving up and down the field, and then of course, the big fumble handoff that A&M got in that one, and then that looked like it was about to be 21-7. And the game was just changed. I mean, Arkansas really didn't do much after that. I think A&M is who they are offensively. I don't think, they're not going to be great this year, but defensively they're really good. And then when Smith, without him for a while, that's going to hurt offensively. But just what was your big takeaways from the A&M and Arkansas game on Saturday night?
Didn't feel to me like the better team won. A&M is one of about three teams I'm just having a really hard time getting a good grasp on. I think them and LSU are the biggest two. Here's the stat for you. If I've got this written down right, A&M, as much trouble as it's having on offense, I think is averaging 8.1 yards per pass, whereas Alabama's averaging 8.0. Which, like, we tend to look at A&M, and I might have to double check that, because I'm like, how is this possible?
Yeah,
I don't think A&M's offense is very good. I don't think their quarterback situation is great. You've heard talk about Jimbo Fisher giving up play calling. I think defense is where they're scary. Offense, they're very pedestrian. In fact, I don't think they're going to score many points this weekend. But it is interesting to take a look at that. The Miami win lost some luster after Middle Tennessee State came down there and won by 14. I don't think Miami's very good. And A&M has just kind of been underwhelming. But, Phillip, that secondary is really good. They got a ton of talent. The talent was the reason they were preseason top 10, top 6, whatever they were. I still don't buy it. I think this is the team that probably loses 4 games by the time the year's out. But I also thought they'd lose to Arkansas. I also thought they'd lose to Miami. They didn't. They're very young. Again, a lot of seasons left. It's very interesting, because I think there's some mixed signals there with them.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, look, Mississippi State, and I had somebody on a couple weeks ago, since Leach has been in the SEC, they've been a very underrated defense at
Yeah.
Mississippi State. And then so that's going to be a very interesting game this Saturday with those two. Alabama, can't have a conversation about SEC without the Crimson
Right.
Tide. They beat Vanderbilt 55-3 on Saturday night. They look good. I think this might maybe the best they've looked all season. But Chris, I look ahead to their schedule. I mean, they've got Arkansas this week, and then they've got to match up with A&M, and then look, they could be playing a undefeated Tennessee team at home, in mid-October. I think these next 3 weeks for Alabama is we're going to really figure out what kind of team and how really good they are. I mean, we know on paper they're one of the most talented teams in the country, but they have shown, some weaknesses, especially in that Texas game. So these next 3 weeks, I think, are going to be pretty big for the Tide.
Yeah, let's start with last year, right? We watched Alabama. It didn't look like the Alabama team we're used to for a lot of reasons, especially once the injuries at receiver started settling in. Defensively, they weren't what they were. And it kind of feels like that again this year with them. The line is not Alabama standards. The power running game is not Alabama standards. The receivers, it's not the Waddle, Ruggs, Smith group that we saw a couple years ago. You can rattle off all the things, but the defense is clearly better than it was a year ago. And with all the flaws last year, including a defense that was not Alabama standard under Nick Saban, that team was still, 10 minutes away from winning a national title?
Mm-hmm.
You got to kind of set that as a baseline and then say, I think everybody thinks this team is probably better. Vandy is not an awful football team the way it has been. I don't put a lot of opinion on Alabama winning that by 52 points, but the point is, I'm with you. I thought Alabama played very well in that game. I think Vanderbilt played a little bit to keep the score close, and I think that sort of exacerbated things. But, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you say look at that schedule, but that's the gauntlet Alabama usually runs every year, and you look up and they've won, 4 games by 95 points or whatever, just like that, and they're in the playoff hunt come the end of the season or in the playoffs. So I don't know. I see some things that aren't vintage Nick Saban Alabama, but I also see a lot of things and see the level they have been playing since that since that scare in Texas, and think I'm not sure this year ends a lot differently than most of the past ones.
I guess my concern was with the A&M game. Look, and I'll go into I think Alabama beats Arkansas. I think they beat A&M. But my concern for Alabama would be that A&M game is going to be emotionally charged because everything that was said in the offseason, and then A&M beating them last year. And then you would follow that up by going to Knoxville. And if they're undefeated, I have a strong feeling that game day will be there. It's just a thought. And then that crowd is going to be lively. It's going to be an emotional afternoon, night, whenever that game is played, when they play Tennessee. That's when I actually look at. And I started saying I'm always weary to talk good about the Vols.
Yeah,
that's a situation where Alabama could go in there and blow them out. We know how Alabama can do, but that's just a situation I think looking down the road that it could be a very interesting storyline if we get that far and those two teams are undefeated when they play each other.
Yeah, Phillip, I think that's one of those scenarios. You look at those games as a block, and your reaction is kind of like mine. Like, boy, that's a tough gauntlet to run. And then by the game at LSU, we don't know what LSU is yet. That series has always been interesting, but I do think Alabama handles Arkansas by double digits this weekend. Arkansas just has not stopped the pass, and I know they're a little healthier there. They got Slusher back. Catalan's done for the year, though. They're All-American. Arkansas was the worst pass defense in the country coming into the weekend or something like that. A&M was not the team to challenge them. And that's the thing. And again, I don't take a lot of things away from Vandy, but Vanderbilt was a whole lot more vulnerable through the air than through the ground. Nick Saban just took that, ran with it. Bryce Young had, I think, 316 yards at half. They're going to do the same thing to Arkansas. They may throw the ball 15 straight times or whatever. They're just going to keep hitting it and hitting it and hitting it because I don't think Arkansas could stop it. You go to the next week. I I think that game, manageable is not the word, but I think that the upset scare is not as big with that in Tuscaloosa. And I know Johnny Manziel pulled off one in Tuscaloosa before, but Johnny Manziel is not their quarterback. They don't have anything close to that. I think that one being in Tuscaloosa really helps. And then the Tennessee one, I had the same thought of you. Heading into last week, I thought that might be your sneaky place where Alabama gets upset. Sneaky's not the word because Tennessee is a top 10 team by a lot of people. But Anthony Richardson, who could not throw the ball for anything all year, didn't have a touchdown pass. He throws for, 450 against Tennessee. Tennessee's defense had played well, but it really had not had much of a challenge. The closest thing it had was Pitt, but Slovis got hurt, midway through the second quarter. To me, that game became a whole lot less problematic for Alabama just based on what Richardson did. I'm not saying Tennessee can't beat them, but Tennessee's going to have to figure a lot in the way of pass defense between now and then if that's going to be as interesting as I thought it was maybe a week ago.
Yeah, that's true. Anthony Richardson had not looked good passing wise, and then you make him look like Patrick Mahomes out there on Saturday. Real quickly, you mentioned at the top the Auburn Missouri situation. I'll tell you what my setup was when that game was going on. I had one TV on that game. I had another TV on the Wake Forest Clemson game. 2 overtime games, 2 opposite. One game where neither team deserved to lose. The other game, both teams did deserve to lose. It's just the Auburn situation. And I put it on Twitter, and it was sarcasm, but it almost felt like, is Brian Harsin trying to lose this game you go 4th and 1 at the 30? I know Anders Carlson missed a field goal before half, but still, you've got a kicker capable of hitting that field goal. And it just the decision to run the ball behind that horrible offensive line. I mean, that offensive line is terrible. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback for Auburn. They're not going to have much success. But just that game and just the whole situation, because it to me, and I think for everybody that follows not just at Auburn, just the conference, feels like it's inevitable. He's not going to be there next year. I mean, Auburn will have a new head football coach next season. He may not last the season. Just, what's been your point of view and your thoughts on what's been going on at Auburn?
That's kind of a Missouri says hold my beer situation here because you talk about how Auburn tried to give it away. Let's look at Missouri for a minute.
They did give it away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the first half, you have the field goal situation where he misses their offsides, whatever the penalty was. Tell me if I've got this wrong. He gets another tryout that he misses. Okay, you're thinking you've got an end of the half situation there where that ought to be top of mind. Don't do that again. You saw it happen at the end of the game. And this is one place I know that Eli Drinkwitz has gotten questioned left and right for that clock management. They get a first down at the 3. Instead of trying to score, they set up for the field goal and they miss it. It goes to overtime, and we'll get there in a minute. But I was not as critical of that. I thought that was very defensible. The chances of what happening there with him missing that kick were overwhelmingly unlikely. I mean, I think he had never missed an extra point, and I don't think he'd missed a field goal under 30 at Missouri. He's an All-American kicker. I mean, that was one of those, yes, that is easy to second guess in hindsight. The percentages on that, there might have been a 1 or 2% chance of him missing that kick based on history. Now, someone said he was a little shakier the week before. Maybe I'm being too kind to Missouri, but in any case, you look at his history, he does not miss that kick. And then you have the play in overtime where, I mean, my goodness, you've got to have the presence of mind in that spot to know, take the ball from the half-yard line and use your 3 plays or 4 plays or whatever, but you can't do what he did. And by the way, I hate that rule of when the ball's fumbled through the end zone, it's a touchback. Why we play football that way. I don't know if that goes out at the half-inch line, it's their ball there, or it's spot of the fumble. I don't get that, but that was the stuff that happened in that game. I mean, I was watching it with Blake Lovell, who's my co-host, and his feed was about 15 or 20 seconds ahead of mine. And he would just sit in there going, oh my goodness, I cannot wait till you see this. And then there would be a lag before I would watch the play. And it was weird watching it that way, but that was one of those that, man, that was a bizarre football game.
Yeah, I was like, of course I live in Alabama, so there were some jokes about that Auburn Jesus returned on Saturday.
That there might be something to that.
There's something about Jordan Hare. There's something about that stadium. I don't know what it is, and it's just one of them things.
Well, and the question I have is, like, how many Auburn fans were just kind of quietly hoping for that to end differently, to get the coaching change that's going to happen moving, and that's a terrible spot to be in September, where you are excuse me, you're having those kind of thoughts. But I'm with you. I just think it seems inevitable.
And lastly, sorry, kept you a little bit longer than I thought I would. I said I was. We're at 25, but we kind of already talked about Alabama, Arkansas. Just going in this week, and why they put this game at 11. This should be a primetime game, not Auburn, LSU. Kentucky and Ole Miss should be in primetime, but it is an 11 o'clock kickoff. I know Ole Miss is a 6.5 point favorite in this one. Just what are your early thoughts? We're talking on Monday on this game coming up Saturday.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't get that kickoff time. Look, you've got 3 or 4 really good football games this weekend, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Alabama, Arkansas, although I don't know that one's going to be good. Kentucky, Ole Miss is going to be a battle. A&M State is almost a toss-up. LSU, Auburn, interesting in its own right. I'm sorry, you got me off track thinking about the TV times and the scheduling. So I've wandered off course here a little bit, but anyway.
Oh, well, just your thoughts going into that Kentucky Ole Miss game, Matt. With some,
yeah. Here's the thing. I was talking to somebody, like I said, that's really connected within the league this morning. Said that the perception is, just said, what's the buzz? Perception is Kentucky's a better football team than people think. Which I'm thinking that's kind of because I think everybody's pretty high on Kentucky, to the point that I wonder if they're too high on Kentucky. I know Rodriguez comes back this weekend, but they've got some other backs that have run the ball before, and their schedule has not exactly been a murderer's row. Kentucky right now averaging 2.4 yards a rush. You look at their offensive line grades on Pro Football Focus, they're not good. Kavoisier Smoke has run the ball well in the past. I just think that I know everybody expects Rodriguez to come in and be the fix for that rushing offense. I think he's a really good back. I think he's going to help. I'm not as convinced that is going to change Kentucky's issues in the running game. Now, on the other hand, you got Will Levis, who's averaging 10.1 yards a throw, is looking like a first rounder. They've got to stay away from mistakes, which has been an issue for them in times past. They're -2 in turnovers. I'm really interested to see what Ole Miss is, because Ole Miss's defense has been really good through 4 games, leaked a little bit in that Tulsa game. And the strange thing about that is Tulsa's quarterback, I don't know if Tulsa was leading the country in passing, but it was up there. That guy goes out. They still have a really good day against an Ole Miss defense that had just locked it down. So I'm not entirely sure what Ole Miss is coming into this one. I tend to think Ole Miss wins this game, being that it's in Oxford. I seem to be a little bit in the minority there, although Ole Miss is favored by 6 in Vegas. But to me, that is the most interesting game of the week.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then, we just got to get up early and get through game day, and about a quarter after 11 when Corso finally puts the headgear on wherever they're at, we'll get this game. So it's going to be I think it's going to be an interesting weekend with that one. Look, Auburn LSU, we know that crazy stuff happens when them two get together. It's just everything going with Auburn right now. Brian Kelly, we'll see. We'll see if craziness ensues at Jordan Hare once again with these two play. But anyways, Chris, it's been great having you on the show. Always appreciate you coming on, talking all things SEC. If the listeners and viewers wanted to follow you online, where can they find you and where can they check out the Southeastern 14?
Yeah, most of our stuff is on YouTube, so just go to YouTube, search for Southeastern 14. You'll find our channel. We were about 300 subscribers entering the year, and I had to take 2 months off for a health thing. We're at 3,200 as of this afternoon. It's growing quickly. People are discovering us. We had over 200,000 views last month. We're previewing every SEC game. We're doing game day shows after rounds of games are over. And we're going to cover baseball and basketball very heavily. In fact, that's kind of why we were founded, was kind of more of a tint towards baseball and basketball than football, but we found our football coverage has taken off too. So there's really not a lot of channels around like us outside maybe the SEC network. So I think if people will give us a shot, they'll like what they see.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys do a great job with all of it. And no one covers basketball and baseball like you guys at SEC. I'll just say that. Awesome. There's awesome content over there with what you and Blake are doing. And Chris, once again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
You bet, Phillip. Thanks for having me.
All right. Once again, thanks to Chris Lee for coming on today's edition of the Phillip Jordan Show. Go check out Chris over at the Southeastern 14 and vandysports.com. Go check out the Southeastern 14 YouTube channel. They do a great job. Almost daily content of SEC coverage over there. Football, they got you with basketball. They'll have you with baseball as well. Got you covered when it comes to the Southeastern Conference. And that's going to do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be jumping into the ACC on the show tomorrow. I'll be joined by Last Word on College Football managing editor. Of course, I write for Last Word on College Football, but I'll be joined by Tulsa. He covers Wake Forest over at Last Word on College Football. So we'll look back at Clemson and Wake Forest, and we'll look at some ACC headlines going into some of the big matchups this week as well in that conference. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. The podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Of course, you can always email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com. I'll talk to you guys again on Wednesday. Until then, bye-bye.